Next, from Springfield, State Treasurer Mike Frerichs holds a press conference calling on the governor to sign the Life Insurance Reform Act. The act would require life insurance companies to search their records and confirm they are not holding death benefits that should have been paid to families of the deceased. This runs about 30 minutes.
House Bill 302 is the Life Insurance Reform Act, and it attempts to right a wrong that has been going on for decades. It requires life insurance companies to keep their promise and pay death benefits. Nothing more, nothing less. And I think that's just the right thing to do. Now, not all life insurance companies pay death benefits after one of their policyholders passes away. Some life insurance companies acknowledge that unpaid death benefits have been used to increase their profit margins. Now, that, to me, is unacceptable. I've never met a man or a woman who purchased a life insurance policy because they wanted to make some insurance company more profitable or because they wanted to make sure that an insurance executive got a bonus. Life insurance benefits are designed to ease the financial pain during a family's darkest hour. And these monies keep a house from being foreclosed upon or keep a child from having to drop out of college. The Life Insurance Reform Act is a very simple piece of legislation. Requires life insurance companies in Illinois to review their records back to the year 2000 to make sure that all death benefits have been paid to policyholders who have died. Now, why is this needed? Because I said, not all life insurance companies pay in a timely manner. And how do we know? In Illinois, life insurance policies are considered unclaimed property, and that falls under the Treasurer's office. Between 2011 and 2015, we identified more than $500 million in unpaid life insurance benefits. About $550 million that was not paid out to grieving family members. And we know that there is more. We know this because the dollars that we identified represent life insurance companies that work collaboratively with Illinois State Treasurer's Office. They open up their books and let us come in to audit their records. But sadly, not all life insurance companies are such good corporate citizens. One company, Kemper, has decided to sue my office to block these audits. And that's why we must stand together to protect the consumers of this state. And I'm joined today by a lot of those champions who are helping us in that fight. So it is also clear the insurance lobby worked against the legislation, needlessly tried to make it partisan, and is urging Governor Rauner to veto this legislation. And how do we know this? The vote totals in the House and the Senate were mostly along party lines. As you can see, though, I'm joined here today by Senator McCann. There are some people who stood up, regardless of party, and did the right thing. Now, the last time I checked, death knocks on all doors. A party line vote defies logic, especially when you consider Republicans in other states led the charge on this issue. Republican-led legislatures in Florida and West Virginia also passed similar, and in some cases tougher, legislation. So I want to commend Senator McCann for breaking ranks and doing the right thing. The legislation last year was prospective. It was going forward. We passed similar legislation last year. This will require life insurance companies to go back to the year 2000, identify people who had policies in effect, and notify their beneficiaries. And they do this by using the Social Security Death Master File. It is a database put together by the Social Security Administration to prevent against waste and fraud. And it's something that has been used by life insurance companies who sell annuities. So we know this is something they can do. So last year, there was also opposition. We traveled around the state. We had task force hearings, and people up here behind me today joined in those. And we created pressure, and the governor signed last year's bill. That's what we hope to do this year. So we simply want them to use companies' Death Master File to look backward to the year 2000. I think it's a simple and a reasonable request. However, this issue that touches every one of us has been muddied up. A common sense solution is now soiled with alternative facts, and that's why I'm here today, to ask upon your help to call upon Governor Rauner to sign House Bill 302 into law. And I want to give you an opportunity to hear from some of those champions. We've got this far. We've passed legislation through the House and the Senate, because of the work of senators and representatives and partners we've enlisted in this fight. And you'll also get a chance to hear from a couple people who have benefited by previous work we've done in this office to identify beneficiaries and notify them and get them what their loved ones wanted them to have. Because at the end of the day, people buy life insurance policies because there's someone in their life that they care about. And whether the policy is for $1 million or $3,000, it meant something to the person buying that policy. And we want to make sure the life insurance companies keep the promises that they made to their policyholders. So first up today, we'll hear from Senator Andy Manar, a great champion, a great fighter of consumers in the Illinois State Senate. Senator Manar.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you, Treasurer Frerichs. I will be brief because my belief is that this legislation is as common sense as it can come in Springfield. I want to first compliment the State Treasurer for his continued work, for being a consumer advocate, and for pushing these issues forward in front of the General Assembly. The governor ought to sign this bill. This is a common sense reform measure that is consumer-friendly, that affords individuals the opportunity to benefit from something that they paid for. There's $6 million that's owed to families in the state of Illinois that is being held, and in many times these families are unaware that that benefit was paid for, most oftentimes by a spouse or another family member. This bill is a common sense way to approach this issue. I've talked to many constituents in my Senate district that have benefited from Treasurer Frerichs' work over the past several years in regards to unclaimed life insurance policies. And many times these changes in their life based on a set of principles and things that family members paid for are life-changing to the survivors. I think that's an important notation behind this legislation. The governor ought to put his signature on this bill so that people who paid for life insurance finally receive the benefits that they're entitled to. The Treasurer's Office has made this a fundamental issue in recent years. And again, I compliment Treasurer Frerichs for continuing to push forward bipartisan legislation that, again, would make available life insurance benefits to individuals who have paid for it.
Thank you, Senator. I really appreciate your help in being such a good champion for consumers in this state and fighting on their behalf. Every person in the state Senate, every senator gets one vote. But I want to make a special point to Senator Sam McCann, who's going to join us and speak here today. Senator McCann was an early supporter, and I know he faced a lot of opposition amongst his caucus, but I think he's demonstrated over the course of his career the ability to break with the party when he thought that it was for the right, it was good for his district. And that's another example. And I want to thank you for his support, not just voting for this bill, but being a co-sponsor of the bill, Senator Sam McCann.
Thank you, Mr. Treasurer. Appreciate it. Mr. Treasurer and everyone else, it's a pleasure to be here with you today. I want to compliment the Treasurer and his staff. You do a fantastic job. You do a tremendous job with your unclaimed property division, the unclaimed life insurance, and all of the other work that you do as our state treasurer. You and your staff are phenomenal. Again, this is common sense. I know that word's been used a lot today. It's the one term that comes to my mind most commonly when we think about this concept or this idea. I remember the first time that I heard about this being an issue around the country was, I believe it was a 60 Minutes report. When I saw this air, I thought, wow, this is something we need to work on. And then as I started investigating it, I saw that, again, as the treasurer alluded, Republicans around the country were leading the charge on this in many places. So it is common sense, and it's about doing what's right for the people. Unfortunately, around here, we've got caught up in this partisanship. We've got caught up in the political will instead of governing. And we need to get out of campaign mode, go into leadership mode at all levels, and do what's right for the people. Remember that we take an oath, that it's not about, campaigning does no good. It does no good to get elected if you can't come here and convey the will of the people and develop good public policy that helps the people of not only our districts, but the state as a whole, and hopefully moves the country forward. Unfortunately, we live in a time where we're putting partisanship ahead of citizenship. And we've got to get back to being Americans and Illinoisans first. And I thank the treasurer and his staff and everyone up here who helped make this a reality. It's going to help people. It's good public policy. It's the right thing to do. And I urge the governor to sign the bill. Thank you.
You know, I just said that every senator's got one vote. Senator Menard, Senator McCann both lent their votes to get this bill passed. But Representative Souchere, she voted for it twice. The bill started in the House, it went to the Senate where it was amended, and had to go back to the House for concurrence. So she was a champion twice on behalf of this issue. And last year when we were fighting, she came forward and shared personal stories as well. And so I would like to hear from Representative Souchere.
Thank you, Treasurer. I appreciate all of your work on this tirelessly for many years. I care about the people of our district. It's not fair. It's not right what's going on. It's a very reasonable request to ask insurance companies to check their death records. It's just that simple. In an audit that was performed, it showed that 65% of the policies that were not paid out to the beneficiaries were lapse policies, meaning that the people were simply dead. No wonder they couldn't pay their policy. I remember when I was a kid, my mom, who's now nearly 96, living in a nursing home, she can't see the E on the chart. Her vision's that bad. And somehow she's expected to keep track of this little book that she had 50 years ago that was written in pencil. There's no names on it from the insurance company, just initials. It's so totally unreasonable to expect our citizens to comply, even though you better not miss a payment, because if you do, you're never going to get the money that you put in. The desecration of justice that's going on right now, the desperation in people's lives, the disconnect of the governor with the everyday people, it's simply more than a person can bear. Again, because I care about the people of my district, I implore the governor, please sign this bill and do the right thing. Thanks again to the bipartisan work of my fellow legislators.
Thank you, Representative. A lot of this stuff wouldn't have been possible without the help of senators and representatives. And we would not be here today if we couldn't get this bill passed to those chambers. But we also had other allies in this fight, allies who joined us all last summer and fall as we had task force hearings around the state, hearing stories from people who didn't receive the benefits that they were promised. And joining us today, someone whose organization was at every one of those hearings and was a big champion in passing this was the NAACP. And today we'll be joined by Teresa Haley and hear her comments as well. Thank you, Teresa.
Thank you, Treasurer. You are the people's treasurer, and this is the people's money. And that's what we want life insurance companies to realize. So many people throughout the state have lost these benefits, are not aware that these benefits exist. As Representative Scheer said, I grew up as a poor kid in the projects, and I can remember the milkman and the insurance man coming around, and my great aunts and grandmas filling out that little booklet and giving them their money. We didn't know what that booklet was about because in our cultures, a lot of us, we don't talk about death benefits. We just expect that things will be handled properly and in order upon someone's death. So this is a very good bill, and I ask that the governor support this bill and sign off on it. It has done a great deal for the people of Illinois. I've heard so many testimonies from people around the state that says that I never knew that my grandmother or my aunt or my uncle left money behind. Now our family members, our children, our grandchildren can go to college because that was money that they invested in these insurance companies and believed that they would pay out. So again, I want to thank the treasurer for being the people's treasurer, and I just want to let the life insurance companies know that that's the people's money and you need to do what's right by the people. Thank you.
Teresa, thank you very much. Also, in addition to the NAACP, AARP joined us for all those task force hearings, and we're joined today by Andre Jordan. Andre, would you like to say a few words?
Sure, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Treasurer. First, we'd like to commend you for bringing forth and passing House Bill 302. I'm Andre Jordan, as you mentioned, the Associate State Director for Advocacy and Outreach for AARP Illinois. And as it was touched on earlier about caregivers, a sort of a forgotten group. In fact, more than 2 million Illinoisans are unpaid caregivers for their loved ones, whether it's an aging parent, an ill spouse, or a child or sibling with disabilities. They work long hours without respite, and they need support. And among their many self-effacing duties, many caregivers purchase life insurance policies as a means to ensure their loved ones can continue to be cared for should they face the tragic loss of their caregiver. So caregivers as a group, as a whole, throughout the nation, especially here in Illinois, understand how financially costly caregiving is and can be, and they count on the life insurance policy to be there in the unfortunate event their family needs it. Anyone who purchases a life insurance policy for their loved one does so not for themselves, but for the people whom they care. So we strongly urge Governor Rauner to sign House Bill 302 to support Illinois caregivers in their most trying and distressful time. Thank you.
Andre, thank you very much. Now, there's a reason why we do this. We don't do it just to pass a bill. We do it because it benefits consumers out there. Now, a lot of these people who took out these policies, by extension, are no longer with us. But there's someone in their life they cared about, they wanted to provide for, and we're joined today by a couple people that we have, through our audits, been able to track down and reunite with money that was promised to them. In some cases, many years after the death of their parent or loved one. So joining us today, first off, Joe Gantt from Decatur, Illinois. I'd like to share his story with money that I believe your mother had set aside for you, or wanted for you.
Thank you. Good morning. Last fall, I received a call from a friend of mine. She said I might have some money coming from the Treasurer's office, the unclaimed property. She'd seen my name on their list on their website. It was money from an insurance policy with Prudential on my mother, who passed away 25 years ago. This policy was probably written in the late 60s or early 70s. At first, I thought the insurance company couldn't find me. And I thought, oh, I'm pretty easy to find. But I realized that the insurance company didn't want to find me. There was no law to force them to make a good faith effort to find beneficiaries. They didn't make any effort. They kept my money for 25 years. That's why we're here today. I want to urge the governor to sign Bill 302 into law to help people get what's rightfully theirs. It shouldn't be political. Yes, it's true, the Democrats introduced it, but Democrats and Republicans got together and passed the bill. If you sign it, maybe that could be the start of something where they might come together on other pressing issues that this state really needs to address. I want to thank the Treasurer and his hard-working staff, especially Paris Irvin, for guiding me through this process, which is really a pretty easy process. I urge everybody to go online and see if you might have money waiting for you too. Thank you.
Phil, spell your last name.
G-A-N-T.
Joe, thank you very much for sharing. Joe Gantt. 25 years after his mother passed away, we got that money for him. I don't think anyone anticipates their loved one waiting more than 2 decades. At the time of death, that's when people most need that money. Going forward, this legislation will take the treasurer out of this process. Going forward, when people die, they'll be notified in a more timely manner. We want to make sure that those people in the past who owed money, though, get what belongs to them. We're also joined today by Cecil Hill, another beneficiary of a life insurance policy. Cecil?
The policies that I had, I was aware of them, but because of the way they were dated and everything, some of them back in the 30s, early 40s, those were very rough times, and my folks, both of them, worked hard, and I know it was difficult to make those payments and run the household, raise me, of course, and And thanks to the Treasurer's office, I had no idea these policies were still good. And like I say, thanks for the Treasurer's office, what they did and the way they helped me. And let me tell you, the money I got, it was $8,000. It was highly appreciated, and my wife and I put it to good use. So I'll be forever grateful to the Treasurer's office for the help that they give me. And I hope we can help a lot of other people. This bill is great. We've needed it for a long time. Thank you.
Cecil, thank you very much for sharing. He makes a great point that sometime along the way we said, well, a lot of these policies are for small dollars. They're not a big deal. For his parents who had suffered the Depression, who were putting aside money, it was a big deal. No one buys a life insurance policy for an insignificant amount of money. For them, personally, it was significant. And all this legislation will do at the end of the day is make sure that life insurance companies keep the promises that they made to their policyholders. No one has signed on that line. No one has purchased a policy thinking, well, I hope my loved one gets their money someday. They were made a promise, and we'd like them to keep it. So I want to thank you all for joining us here today to talk about an issue I think is very important, and I think I speak for people behind me when I say we'd all be happy to answer any questions members of the media might have.
Treasurer, have you called the governor's office, and what reaction, if any, have you had, indicating whether he will or will not?
The bill is under review. So last year, I think he took to the very last day of 60 days before signing it. Didn't give us any indication in advance. Last year, we brought a lot of attention to this issue before he signed it. We're doing the same thing this year.
Treasurer, are some of these insurance companies holding on to these death benefits? Are they building that into their business plan?
Their SEC filings state exactly that they count these as part of their business model and as a profit engine for them. You know, to make it clear, my office called one person. I called him personally myself. That he was orphaned at age 15 and was not aware his mother had a life insurance policy when she died. Went to go live with family members who hadn't saved anything for college for him, so he went into the military, a great career. But when we called him last year, he was 28 years old, we'd asked him if he had any idea that his mother had a life insurance policy, and he said, no, I didn't. How much was it for? We said it was for $175,000. His response was, wow, I might have made different decisions in my life if I had that money at the time of her death. Now, a smart guy. He said, wow, that was 13 years ago that my mother passed away. How much is it worth today? He said $175,000. His response, you mean to tell me the life insurance company didn't invest my money? Well, in fact, they did. They invested that money. I'm sure they doubled, more than tripled that amount, and they got to keep it all. And that's why they fought us so hard on this. You know, and I'll tell you, that individual made it clear that he wanted to see legislation like this passed. He didn't want something like that to happen to someone else. That's what's at stake.
I was going to ask, is there any requirement that the insurance companies pay interest on these policies?
No, so there's no requirement they going forward, but with last year's legislation, which required them to check the death master file against their list of policyholders twice a year, the beneficiaries will be paid in a timely manner and interest won't be an issue going forward. Any other questions?
I've got one on a different subject. Were you in the legislature when the tax breaks were given to Sears to stay in Hoffman Estates? And I guess they're trying to now maybe cut those tax breaks off because their employment levels have fallen. Were you in the legislature at the time, and what are your thoughts today about Sears and those tax breaks?
Yeah. Well, I think I was in the legislature at the time, and I think what you saw was they were expected to have certain employment levels, and I think they now dipped below it, and so they are losing those breaks going forward, is my understanding.
Do you think they should lose those breaks, and should we be doing other bailouts like that in the future?
I think if there was an agreement, if there was a deal negotiated, you know, that on the one hand, we're going to offer you some incentives to stay here in Illinois, but you have to meet certain requirements, and they don't meet them, If they've not upheld their end of the bargain, I don't think the state should honor its end. I don't know if anyone else here was here who had a kind of comment on that.
Should the state legislature do this in the future, provide these tax breaks to keep companies here?
Well, I think if the legislature is going to do it, I think they need to have clawback mechanisms in case the company doesn't uphold their end of the bargain.
Mike, on the insurance policy, do you, just anticipating what an insurance company possibly would respond, does it matter if the policy is a whole life or a term life?
Well, Senator McCann referred to a 60-minute story, so it shouldn't matter. But we found in some cases, people had whole life policies with value built up. When they died, they stopped making payments. The insurance company, in many cases, documented cases, rather than contacting to see what had gone wrong, why they didn't make their payment, had something happened to them, said, oh, well, we'll just deduct the premium payment from the value built into the policy. And year after year, we continue to deduct the payment on someone who already died. They're paying for a policy after they died. Would draw down the full value that had been built up in a whole life policy. That is unconscionable. They ought to be ashamed themselves for doing that. Under this law, the law passed last year and this one, they will not be able to do that because they will have to go back and confirm and then notify the beneficiaries. But in other states, yes, I imagine they're still doing that in other states.
Another bill on the governor's desk deals with the Secure Choice Savings Program.
Mm-hmm.
I know that you kind of helped spur that along when you were in the legislature. What's the fate of that program, even if the governor was to sign it? Because the federal rule changes. Is it pretty much dead in the water as of now?
No, not dead in the water at all. Illinois is moving forward. I think the CRA that was passed by Congress and signed by President Trump is going to make it more difficult for businesses in this state. I think ultimately it'll be clear in the courts that the state is the fiduciary. The Secure Choice Board will be in charge of this program and not individual businesses. Businesses that aren't making any choices on plans, they're just facilitating collection of dollars. I think that should be clear. But I also think if the Department of Labor rule had stayed in place, it would be crystal clear from the start that these businesses didn't have any legal responsibility under ERISA. And I think what the members of Congress did, what Congress and the President, was muddy the waters and make it less certain and put additional legal risk on Illinois businesses.
Can you also speak to the possible junk status the state's looking at if nothing's done by the end of the month? But also we had 7 public universities downgraded as well, 5 of them now considered junk status. What's that mean for the taxpayer, and how does your office interact with all that?
Well, we could talk about that for a while. And I would leave it to anyone else here who wanted to comment on this. I'll step away from the mic. But I will first say this is wrong. We are one step above junk status. I don't purchase Illinois bonds. The state doesn't buy its own bonds. But if I wanted to, I would be prohibited. The General Assembly limits where I can make investments. We want to make sure that we preserve capital and that I'm not taking risks in my office and investments. And by their definition, the state of Illinois is too great of a risk for the state to invest in. Now, what does that mean? That means that when the governor goes out and issues more debt, as he's done fairly routinely, we're going to pay significantly more in interest. And some people will say, oh, okay, what does that matter? You know, professors at U of I conducted a study of last year's debt issuance, June of last year, when we had a higher credit rating. Instead, it cost the state of Illinois an additional $70 million to issue that $550 million in debt. Additional $70 million that could have gone into fixing our roads and our bridges, but gone into our schools or institutions of higher education, and instead is going to Wall Street bondholders. And it's fairly clear that the rating agencies have said the big problem here is the lack of a state budget. We've gone nearly 2 years now without a real state budget in place, and I think that should be the #1 priority for everyone involved in this. Does anyone else want to handle that question?
Can you speak to another aspect of the downgrade as well, the debt, the amount of debt we have? Pension debts through the roof, the unpaid bills are topping $14 billion. So, I mean, how does the state get control of that?
I think one place to start is passing balanced budgets and then having a plan to pay down that debt. There's no magic bullet out there, and once again, I'll defer to anyone else who's serving in the legislature. There's no magic bullet. If you find yourself, your house underwater, the way you get out. If you find yourself with too much credit card debt, is you tighten your belt and you make the payments. And you don't solve your problem overnight, but you start paying it down month after month after month until it becomes manageable. That's what the state of Illinois needs to do as well.
Senator Bernard, just real quick, at the microphone.
Would you like to ask the question first? Yeah.
I know in the past, like with ADM moving out of Decatur or moving some jobs out of Decatur, you had some thoughts on edge tax credits.
Yep.
Should any type of tax credits be used, in this case, in the case of Sears or ADM or anybody else, should tax credits be used to keep these companies here in Illinois?
So sure. I would echo what the treasurer said. If there's going to be a scenario that utilizes tax credits, certainly during a time of a fiscal crisis, there should be the highest bars set. In the case of Sears, there was a job retention number that was agreed upon many years ago. Anything moving forward should have very clear clawback provisions so that if those standards aren't met by the company that accepts credits, then they would have to pay back what taxpayers gave up for them. It's a tricky balance. We went through it with ADM. The treasurer helped me out with that. He helped me navigate through that very difficult water. Ultimately, those weren't granted, as you know, Doug. But each of these things is individual circumstances that are differing than the other. I think it's a mistake to put them all under one umbrella. But I think one thing that is absolutely necessary is that if the business, if the corporation doesn't uphold its end of the bargain that was agreed to, then they owe money back to the taxpayers of the state.
All right. Thank you all very much. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Senator.